Ben Westbeech.
If I'd remained in England, in London, it could have been a very different story.
It's not business, it's a gamble. You never know.
This is something that is meant to give me loads of joy, but it's not anymore.
And then the touring costs are it's just insane. You forget how easy it is to just rock up with your USBs and smash out a club show.
You know, any true artist is going to go against the grain. I am textbook self-sabotage. Even if I wasn't getting paid to do this, I would still do it.
Mr. Ben Westbeech, how's it going, mate?
Hello, Will. How are you, mate? How you doing?
Good, man. Long time no see. I think the last time I saw you was a Dirty Bird camp out, probably 8 years ago.
Wow, that is a long time. But what a great party, right?
Fucking so much fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were good times, those were, you know, all the crew, Justin and Claude, Jay Flip, all the crew, man. Worthy, Miss Worthy now, all the crew.
I kind of miss it. I miss the early days of the Dirty Bird days, right?
Yeah, they were special times, I think. You know, especially, I think because they sort of brought in a few people from the UK, people like, you know, me, yourself, Eats Everything.
Yeah. Cats and Dogs Boys.
Yeah, it was a good crew. It was wicked. It was really good fun.
Do you think you could get that nowadays?
I think you can. I think it's, you know, it's obviously changed so much, the whole scene and, you know, everything around it. Because in those days, right, it was like, you know, hardly any phones, people just vibing out, real, you know, from how they started that party, you know, in San Francisco to then what it became and the sort of machine that it's come afterwards. I guess it will never be the same because there was a naivety there, I guess, that isn't there now, you know?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I think that's the thing is like when things are starting out, I guess it's the same with a lot of crews, right? It starts out with kind of zero intentions apart from just having a good time with your mates and throwing some parties and writing some records. Yeah. And then I guess business gets involved and it changes.
Yeah, as soon as, you know, big money starts coming in and, you know, it changes the vibe. You know, it's always the way, isn't it? You know, something seems are cool and then, you know, it becomes, I guess, more about business and cash and then just, you know, numbers, I guess. And I guess it can maybe dilute it a bit from what it was originally made for. But it's like anything, I think, in life, you know, it's immediate, like any scene, fashion, music, art, you know, the scenes get started and then advertisers want a piece of it. Do you know what I mean? Or, you know, that's how the world works. It always has worked like that. Do you know what I mean? It's just very quick these days, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like scenes start out as what we call as cool, right? And then the cool turns into the uncool when it becomes super popular, which is strange that that's how it is. But it's just, you're right. It's the same with maybe not so much art. I think art is the one thing that, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like, let's say for instance, like Banksy, right? Banksy's remained cool the whole time. Like, I don't think he's ever like got uncool.
No, he's always stuck to his real, you know, it's a graffiti mentality, isn't it? It's like you got to be, you know, invisible because otherwise you get nicked.
Yeah, but I guess music comes in waves, fashion comes in waves. It's strange. It's really strange. How have you found it over the years of like being an artist and kind of going through the waves of what you do as Ben Westbeech and what you do as Breech? Is like, how have you come to terms with things become fashionable and go out of fashion?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, with music, you know, it's quite, you know, fad based almost. You know what I mean? You'll get waves of things that are big. You know, when I was growing up, like rock and indie was huge, and we haven't seen, you know, much of a resurgence of that for a few years. And you know, you sort of wonder. There's always a thing of what's coming next and how that fits into what you're making as art. I mean, I think for me, I've always tried to maintain that sense of self and artistry and doing it for the right reasons. Like in my heart, rather than, you know, trying to jump on a bandwagon or do this or do that because I feel like it's going to make me a buck or two.
Mm.
I've never approached music like that. I think these days it's, you know, it's highly competitive, and maybe the art of music is getting lost somewhat because it's not maybe as important now to get gigs rather than your, you know, your social media, you know, action, and your, you know, how your algorithm's working and what's working for you. I think, you know, it's just, I think you've got to move with the times though. That's the thing. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Otherwise you'll just be completely stuck in the mud as well. So there's sort of, there's a 50-50 to it. You know, I've tried to really maintain sort of, yeah, just in myself, a sense of knowing what I'm doing feels right for me at that time. And I've
Yeah.
tried not to swerve on that, you know?
No, I love that, and I think you've done that really well. Like, especially with both projects, but like I listened back to your like back catalog of Ben Westbeech and listening to like what you're doing with the new album now. And although it's evolved, it's still you. It kind of feel like it's that soulful, funky R&B, jazz kind of influenced house music, realistically, or music. And is there a point of like stubbornness where it comes to you as an artist to be like, maybe that's the wrong word, so don't be offended by that, but it's like, no, I'm just doing what I actually love to write, and people are either going to like it or they don't.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the sort of the idea was, especially with this album, is to, you know, remain true to my sound and my soul, and write songs essentially. You know, I think that's also in, especially in dance music at the moment, I think we're lacking a lot of song based stuff. You know, it's all like seems to be, you know, one line sample, or, you know, three words, you know, repeated over and over and over, which is, you know, all good. I get that that's, you know, part of dance music, and I fully respect that. I just don't know if I've got the mental capacity to sort of just roll out stuff like that 24/7. I just, it wouldn't feel right to me as an
Yeah,
artist.
yeah, yeah.
But you know, I think I've tried to, yeah, just maintain, you know, writing good songs, and you know, writing songs is the key to what I've always done. I've always been a songwriter, and that's what I love doing. So I can't, you
Mm,
know, go into session. You know, I can go into a writing session if that's what's needed for a song. I think you can hear if it needs, you know, two lines repeated for 32 bars and then a drop. But you
yeah.
know, I think there's a time and a place for that. You know.
Yeah, I think as also it's like it's going into the studio and working out what the actual goal is, right? And I think that's kind of treating music as a business. But I think realistically, it's like, well, are you writing club records or are you writing a song? There's difference between both of those, right?
Yeah, for sure, and you never know, you know, what's going to make you more money. I guess I think I go into it from writing a really, making really good art, and if it goes and it's successful, then that's really great. If it's not, you know, I'll take one, you know, and just make another app, make more music.
Yeah,
It doesn't bother me so much. I think it used to when I was maybe had like much more of an ego and was like more competitive maybe with others. But I think as I've matured and grown up, um, I feel like now, like I'm just in competition with myself. You know, I've kind of
mm,
removed myself from, you know, I live in Ibiza now and try and live quite a sort of, you know, quiet life here almost, you know what I mean? And gone are the days of me, you know, being out in London all the time, being seen at all the parties and having
yeah,
to be part of that, or feeling a need to be part of that. Which I think is important. If you know, when I was there and doing it, it was feeding my soul at that point, you know, club nights, scenes, you know, you had garage, dubstep, drum
yeah.
ball, you know what I mean? It was all popping off, and that was great. But I think now as I've grown older, I feel less inclined to be drawn into that. But some part of me misses it in a way as well. Do you know what I mean? Because there was
Yeah, totally. Was there a process of like where you decided to kind of go down that route and just be like, look, you know what, I don't need to compete against others or compare myself to others of where I'm at. Like you're established enough that you can just do what you want. What was that process? Because I think it is something that I battle with, and I think pretty much 99% of artists battle with, of like wanting to write the music they absolutely love and then also wanting to write music that's successful.
Yeah. I mean, I think, at the time it was, for me, I was having, it was quite healthy competition. It was me, I had a studio with Clips in Bristol, and
Yeah,
if you're in these sort of studio buildings, you're often hanging out in each other's studios and hearing, what he was doing at the time. Sonically, I was just like, Jesus, I need to like buck my ideas
yeah,
up.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
he was creating stuff that I was just like, this is bonkers, and also, with Crust and Die and Ronnie
yeah,
Sides and all those people that I was kind of learning off. I guess I had a really high standard from quite early on, and sonically, from an engineering perspective. And it was that, I think, was really good competition, because it was like you were hearing tunes, you were like, wow, that's dope. That's really inspired me. I want to make something as good or better than that. And
yeah,
when you're learning, it's like that's really, I think, healthy competition. I think when it starts getting unhealthy is if you're like, looking at other people's success or social media presence and thinking, oh, why isn't that me? Why can't I do that? Or, then I think it starts getting unhealthy. But I think, if you want to sort of be inspired, let's look at like the Beach Boys and the Beatles. Do you know what I mean? When they were making those two albums, it was just like inspiring, inspiring, inspiring. Just like, let's outdo them, let's outdo them. And
yeah,
I think that's healthy. That's like artistry, competitive. But then when you're talking about jealousy and stuff like that, I think the lines can get blurred, and it can be really difficult as an artist not to be like, why aren't I getting traction? Or but to me that doesn't really matter anymore. But I think, for a lot of my career, it kind of did at points, when you're looking at
massively.
lineups and you're thinking, oh, I should be on there. Or, it's a tough one. I think it's something you have to just live with as an artist. If you're in any sort of creative industry, it's competitive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I try and look at it. There's space for everybody in this scene. I think like no matter how big or small you are, the ability for everyone to be massive, and there's ability for everyone to be small.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there comes in, it's similar to what we were talking about at the beginning, is like people go in and out of fashion, artists go in and out of fashion, and I think there's one year somebody's going to be massive, and the next year they're not necessarily going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread, and that kind of goes in and out. And then you've got the outliers that are just big all the time. But I still think if you speak to them, they have ebbs and flows in their careers, right? Um, at what point were you? Because I know you were living in Bristol, living in London. You were spent quite a lot of time in Amsterdam, I believe.
Yeah, I spent 10 years in Amsterdam.
Mm,
I kind of moved there before I had, real success with Jack and Everything You Never Had, and then, those two top 10 records.
yeah,
And I was in Amsterdam at that point where no one really gave a shit. You know what I mean? It was like, it was kind of great, because it humbled me at that time.
yeah,
I think if I'd remained in England, in London, it could have been a very different story. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
But I think that was a humbling experience, because they were so into, you had like Rush Hour, obviously, which was a key record shop, Red Light Records, places where I really learned my craft even more than
yeah,
I had in London, almost, and was
yeah,
sort of taken out of that scene where, I was doing really well, and, obviously DJing internationally, it was kicking off. I was on tour all the time. But sort of being there sort of gave me like a kick in the arse. It was like, you ate shit almost. Because it put me back in that place of like, right, I've got to, go back in on the art now and learn about these sounds. And, I think that's when I sort of started learning more about, other music and record digging and stuff like that. There's a guy called James and Abel, who were running Red Light Records at the time, who were like really lovely to me, and just, brought me in, and we'd just be in that record shop all the time, digging, digging, digging. Just my brain was getting expanded with different sounds, and I was getting more into like psychedelics, and just, it was, I was into like psych rock and 70s folk and stuff like that, stuff that I really love now. But
yeah.
at that time it was kind of flipped it on the head for me, because I was obviously just all about,
Preach.
making house music and bangers, and sort of, yeah, just, I mean, that was, a brilliant time for music. But then I kind of just moved, I had to move on. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't
What?
just do that formulaic thing all the time.
Yeah. What was that kind of period? Because there was almost like I love your Ben Westbeech music, and I've loved your Breach music over the years, but there was almost a period where Breach didn't release anything, right? And
Yeah,
it kind of stopped, and it kind of stopped in. It might not have been for you, but it felt for me quite abrupt, where it just kind of didn't happen. And I
yeah.
was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I need some Breach records in my life. What was that part of your life of like deciding to go, you know what? It's not it.
Yeah, well, do you know what? It was just, I think I was doing too much of it, the touring, I was, playing, 4 nights a week or something like that. It was getting, ridiculous for, it was like a sort of 10-year period almost. And I just thought, do you know what? Like, this isn't making me really happy anymore. And I think
Mm,
that's what I had to address and go, right, do I, just lock this off and, go on a sort of self search and, who am I? What am I doing? Because this sort of thing had got really big. And I just walked away from it for a bit because I had to for my
yeah,
mental health, I think, to be honest.
yeah,
And um, I just started making the Vision record as well, and my ears were kind of changing. I was more getting into having like a band again and making like some indie music and doing all these things that I love to do, because I think it had become too much. I felt like I was on a hamster wheel. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? It was like you're DJing so much and you're not, it's really hard then to get time to make good records, I think, unless you're paying someone else to make them, which obviously
yeah.
happens a lot these days with bigger DJs. You see that you can sort of be on that level where you don't really have to make music. Someone else can make it in the background, you put your name on it. But I just felt like I couldn't keep on at that pace and still really make great records. And so I had to just decide to just stop it for a bit. Basically, it's funny me talking about it because I'm actually just making some Breach records again
Sick.
now for the first time in years.
Love that.
So yeah, it's I had to do it. It was really hard to walk away from.
I can imagine, man, because I think it's like me walking away from what I'm doing now. Like and I'll be honest, there's periods, especially like from last year to this year, there's periods where I'm like, is this actually making me happy? Like truly, like is what I'm doing something that I wake up every day and excites me? And I don't think it necessarily always is, right? And I think there comes points, kind of what you were talking about before, of like when you start comparing yourself to others, or when you start questioning your career and what you're putting out and why it's not succeeding to a certain levels of what you expect it, or the expectations you put on it, right? And I think, as I don't know about you, but on my project I put huge expectations on what things, how things should perform, and that's not necessarily me comparing it to other artists, it's just me comparing it to myself,
Mm-hmm.
and what my expectations are. But at like when you're going back to that time when you were like, I really need to stop, was it an abrupt stop, or was it like, did you feel it coming?
It was quite an abrupt stop, really. It was, I decided to just, just just stop doing it. Do you know what I mean? If you don't put
Yeah.
any more records out, for a while, it can just disappear. It's just, unless you have the consistency to keep on making those records all the time formulaically, which I just wasn't prepared to do. At that time, was like, I need to do something else. I'm sick of hearing, massive bass lines and kick drums at really loud volumes. But it's like an onslaught. And don't get me wrong, I loved every moment of it, but it just got to a point where musically it didn't make sense for me at that point. And that
Mm.
was it really. It was a musical decision really. But then obviously you have to deal with a financial, a change in financial circumstances because you're not, bringing in loads and loads of money DJing anymore. So I had to sort of reevaluate what I was doing and how to work my career to keep on, making money from what I do.
How did you do that?
Production, writing, songwriting, obviously my royalties, my catalog, my publishing rights.
Yeah.
It's all kept me going, and I continue obviously to write and do new projects and music all the time now. So and as I said, yeah, just started making some Breach records again. So
It's
it's all
cool, man. Because when you were doing the Breach project, did you stop doing the Ben Westbeech? Because I can't really remember back then. Just so it was just like kind of a switch up.
yeah, it was exactly the same thing. Just uh, I was at a place where I'd made 2 albums, toured with a band for like 5-6 years,
Yeah.
which is completely different from DJing.
Yeah.
You're like hemorrhaging money everywhere.
Oh my
Um,
god. Yeah.
but,
100%.
yeah, so it was a decision like I had exactly the same that I had to make when I started the Vision, and then now going back to the Ben Westbeech album, and then I kind of get into it. It's like being in a movie for me or something like that. I get into its space, of making an album or making it. I have to lock myself off almost and sort of get into a method acting mode of like, right, this is the album I'm making, put this hat on and make this music, which I find really fun now. But I think at the time it just all got a bit too much, to be honest.
Yeah, because I was thinking that of like, did you ever struggle with the identity of both projects?
Yeah, a little bit, I think, because that's what you're out there as, and people, having aliases is weird because you're like a completely different character.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of strange if you think about it. Um, but it's just, I guess, it's like different brands now. I just look at it as different forms of a business. I sort of try and compartmentalize everything into like little boxes instead of going, who am I? What am I doing?
Yeah.
Having
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
existential crises every Monday morning.
Yeah, it must be tough. But I guess, did you ever do an album as Breach?
No, no, I never did an album. It was
Just
always
club
singles.
bangers. You did your DJ Kicks mix, right? That I think that
Well,
was the
yeah, I guess that's kind of an album.
yeah.
But, yeah, no, nothing. I didn't do a Breach album. That I mean, there could be something in the making. So
Mm. So with the Ben Westbeech, there was more. It felt like more of like a album based project generally over the years, right?
yeah,
Um, when you started doing the Vision, which was between, correct me if I'm wrong, it's between you and Con, right?
yeah,
And you had some features, or it's just Andrea, right? Was
it's
she the only
Andrea
feature?
Triana and the Dames Brown.
Yeah. So when you okay, end Breach, the Vision starts.
Yeah,
Talk to me about the process of writing that album, of like how that, like across a period of time, how does that work?
yeah, it was strange. It was an idea that me and Connor come up with, and we just spent. I mean, it took 5 years to make that
Wow.
record. I mean, it was like it was.
Wow, so that came out 2020, you started 2015.
Yeah, we started making it in 2015, and I was DJing in Bali, at the W Hotel, and Cy Dunmore was there,
Yeah.
and we were DJing together there. And I can remember just playing in the demos, and I think it was like 3 or 4 tunes or something like that. And then he was just like, "Right, I want it. Let's do it on Defected." So I was like, "Okay, cool." So I sort of got that deal in place, and then it was a lot of it was quite a stressful album to make. I'm not going to lie, it was pretty full on, but the end result was really great. But then, of course, just as it was coming out, COVID hit, and it
Yeah.
was just like this. I was just like, oh my god, do you know what I mean? That was quite frustrating because we were doing loads of, we were booked to do loads of festivals, like great festivals, and then it just went zoom like that.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh my lord, like this is, here we go again. Do you know what I mean? But there's ups and downs, I think, with music, and no one saw what was going to happen with that in any, business, and a lot of people suffered, hugely because of that. And my heart goes out to them. That luckily I'm still standing. It was okay, and I just didn't get to tour an album that probably should have done. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm grateful to be in a good place after that, to be honest.
No, I totally agree. I think also the album you wrote was such a great listening album. Like I was
Yeah,
listening to it this morning, and it doesn't even need to be heard live, although it would be amazing to be heard live. But I think there's difference in certain albums where it's just a bunch of hits put together,
yeah,
where this album like truly flows as like an artist album. And I think nowadays, and I'm not saying it's in the electronic world, because it is and it isn't, right? But it kind of sits in between both. But I think from an outsider, from listening, it's like there's not many artists that are putting albums together in our industry now. And I think the album culture has changed over the years, and people don't listen to albums as much. Like, is that something you battle with now?
I mean, I've always kind of been into making albums. I come from, I guess, that era. I'm like 40, well, I'm 43, 44 this year. So, I come from a background of growing up with albums,
Yeah,
and,
same.
and I respect the artistry of an album. That's like, for me as a musician, that's the ultimate work you can put out. It's there's meaning, in album. So obviously people make albums that don't have any meaning at all, but I think
Literally.
for art to have, it needs to have the meaning for me to for it to come out, for it to be allowed to come out. And, that's how I've always approached a lot of making music, is through that vehicle, so to speak.
Yeah.
But, I know that a lot of labels can't afford to give album advances now, and it's tough for a label to even take on an album. I would have thought, because it's
Yeah.
a lot of promotion, and like to really generally give it the best option it can to be released. It's a lot of hard work, and lots of people can just whack out a single, and it's easy. It makes more financial sense, obviously, but if it's done right, it can be beneficial for everyone. I think I just love albums. I'm an album guy. Of
Same, man. I think it's also, we're just showing our age, right? It's like we grew
course,
up
yeah.
listening to albums. Do you think they'll come back?
I mean, I think there is a sense of the new generation where there's probably going to be a backlash at some point to, like, all the, how everything's moving. I think there's got to be, do you know what I mean, for true art to survive almost. So I think it, people are into it. It just depends kind of what music you're in, I guess. Maybe it sort
Yeah.
of pushes it in one direction as well, because if you're looking at like UK rap or something, even the music we're into, dance music, it's like, if something comes out and it goes viral, it's just like bam, 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 and then it's out, and then it's a lot quicker, it's a lot easier. You can react to stuff quicker, and then the consumers can react to it quicker. And it's like a mix mash. There's too much information at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Because I did my first album last year, and I think like it's so much hard work putting into an album. Like the amount of work that goes into it, not even just writing the songs, but like once the songs are finished, in a sense of, then you have to mix and master, then you have to work out artwork, then you cut, just like everything behind it is so much work. And then for it to be released, and then you're like, and then what? And
Yeah.
it's such a strange feeling, because it's like, I don't know if you've felt that experience, but it's like you put so much work into it, and it kind of consumes your life for a long time. And then after it's out, you're like, okay, well, what do I do now? Do I start something new? Like, how do you give yourself time, or like, what is that like process after the album's out?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think, albums also, once they're delivered, so like if you think about the timeline of an album, so if like conception of ideas, it's probably going to take like probably a year before you've made enough tunes
Yeah,
to then whittle down to the 9 or 12 or whatever, how many you want to put on it. Because I think people forget that when you make an album, you're probably going to make 40 tunes, maybe,
easy.
something like that, that are then put into a big folder, and then you have to kind of like work out a consistency, a cohesiveness that it's really difficult. It's not difficult, but it's, you know, it's a longer process than just whacking out a single, obviously. But it's
Totally.
that in depth that I love. I love the business of that. That's what I love to do. But yeah, you get consumed by it, you know, and then there's, you know, for it to even come out, there's even more time constraints. So it's like a constant sort of, oh, this is making me not make another. Um, but it's, you know, it's a process. It's a difficult process. But it's like, do you want to make art like that, or do you just want to, you know, smash out and just, you know, do some pub grub and get it all done? Do you know what I mean? It's like, or do you actually get into a process and enjoy it and, you know, become it? You know, I think that's what true music and art form should be. There should be that, like, you know, you're not suffering for your art, so to speak, but it's a deep journey, an album, and even,
Yeah.
you know, teaches you about yourself. You know, friendships are formed, friendships are lost. Like, you know, it's an emotional thing, music. So even like the process can be emotionally really difficult as well. Do you know what I mean?
Totally agree. Yeah, you're right. Because I think when you're writing an album, so much happens in life as well, right?
Yeah.
Like people pass away, new people come into your life, and it's like all of those external things happening influence the music
Yeah,
massively,
absolutely. And I think you
massively.
can't, you know, you can't control those things, and that invariably would come into your art because it's going on in your life. You know, how could it not? You know, if
Yeah,
you're making true music from the heart and your experience, you know, I think you can make hypothetical music all day and it's not a problem. But I
of
think if
course.
you're prepared to open yourself up emotionally and be vulnerable for something to come through you, then it's a totally different story and
Well, I think
experience.
it's like how many love songs have been written, right?
Yeah.
Like they're just generic love songs, but because it's such a feeling that everyone has experienced at some point in their life, is everyone can sing about it and everyone can relate to it, right? But I think when it's uniquely something that you're going through yourself, not everyone can relate to that. And I think being able to put that onto your art is hard. It's hard to even go into a session and talk about it. It's like therapy, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, I mean, for me, it's definitely been therapeutic. The whole making of this new record was definitely therapy at some point for me, when it was, you know, just dealing with issues within myself or stuff that had happened in the past, and, you know, sort of everything coming out and being open. And it's, you know, it is like getting it all out. You know, I think there's a sense of that, especially with me personally, with music. It's like, you know, it's like, you know, you're almost like vomiting the emotion out, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just like, wow. And then you'll come out of the session, you'll be like, oh, I feel a bit better today. Do you know what I mean?
Funny about that.
Yeah.
Everything is within you. You sent me the album. I don't actually know when this episode comes out. Let me just double check because the album might be out by the time
Okay, no stress if it is.
this comes out. Yes, it actually is out. So the album's out now, which is sweet. But at this moment in time when we're recording, the album wasn't out. Um, what's the title about? I never ask people this because I don't really talk to many people that write albums, but Everything is Within You is quite a powerful title. Where did that come from?
I think it just came from a space of me realizing, you know, sort of like what I'm here to do, and that I can do it and will continue to do it without, you know, any form of, you know, if even if I wasn't getting paid to do this, I would still do it. And that everything, you know, that is within us is who we are, and, you know, what we're about, essentially. And so not to hide that ever, and try and know that you got the power within you to change things. And, you know, there's a lot of like self hope, I guess, in the album title, and I think that's what a lot of the tunes speak about. You know, is helping yourself and being strong within your own skin.
Mm. I love that the album title isn't actually any track title as well. I don't think there's many albums out there that doesn't have a track that's kind of the title of the album, which means to me that you've actually thought really deeply about the process of how the album is presented to people. Was there like an idea or a concept before it was written to go, I need to write it about this specific thing? Or was the title that something came after?
it kind of came afterwards because they were obviously the label saying what's the album called. So I had to have a real think about that, and I think I thought about the process of the album and that the people I'd met and the friendships I'd formed and just all of the love within it, I think. And then that made me think about, the sort of the things that I'd been through before, and maybe that I maybe didn't love myself so much, or I was questioning like, who I was again. Here we are again in this, musical dilemma that I seem to put myself in every time. And just knowing that I'd done it before and I'd been through it before, and that I had, everything within me to make it happen again,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
for that it was a personal thing for me, but then I think was quite fitting for the album as a whole as well as a title.
No, it makes complete sense. Again, on this album, like similar to the Vision, you've worked with kind of irregular artists, Ra, and obviously James Brown's on quite a lot of records as well. Was there a reasoning behind that? Do you like to have like consistency through the records when you're writing?
Yeah, I think so. I think also if I find a singer that I'm really really into, I just want to work with them all the time. So
Yeah.
it's like that. But I think Holly obviously was a huge part of this record, Ra, and then her partner James Toth, who's a Michelin starred chef, who's an absolutely lovely fella. We had a really strong bond formed. With, and they, I stay at their house in London. They always come stay with me here in Ibiza, and it's having her on board really changed everything. It was like another Andrea figure who'd come in and was like, wow, we write great songs together, so let's do more of it. And it kind of just happened naturally, I think, after meeting her. And obviously the James Brown, I have an incredible relationship, and they were obviously on the Vision record, and it felt really fitting that they should be on this record as well.
Yeah, there's a concept of working with the same vocalist over and over again. I think there's a connection that you can make together, right? That doesn't happen in one session, and I think it happens in multiple sessions over and over again. And the relationship grows it outside of the studio as well, which I think just makes the connection of songwriting just way stronger.
Yeah, for sure. It's real life, isn't it? At the end of the day, and that's kind of what affects music, especially my music and my relationships, and that people that come in and out of my life, and all these changes that happen. And I think if you meet someone you just really vibes with and you make great music with, you're not going to stop it. I think to do an album with someone is obviously a huge thing, and she just came with it every time. And obviously, Obi Frankie as well, who's on the record, who I perform with live a lot, and who I'd met performing live with the Vision when Andrea couldn't do some shows. Obi stepped in, and then that started that relationship. And I was like, wow, I'd love to get you on this record, even if it's just for one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's great to do that with her as well, and just really special women who are just incredible.
Yeah, there's some insane voices on the album. Do you plan on touring it?
I think we will. Yeah, we're in talks now to do kind of like almost like a hybrid show, and where we can do it with a band. We'd love to if we can get the right budgets to do it, because we of course having a sort of 6-7 piece band
Costs so much money.
It costs a ridiculous amount of money, and if unless someone's really sort of paying to promote it, it's quite tough, and that's just the reality of it. We obviously performed up at Agra Madeira here in Ibiza and recorded the live sessions, which was just such a beautiful thing to do in an amazing
insane
place.
Man, looked insane.
Yeah, and so if we can do that, which we can, it would be wonderful. But obviously, we're just looking at sort of a more stripped down show. But we're going to do an album launch at NTS Loft on June the 5th, I believe. So.
Dope.
Yeah, with the singers and stuff.
Yeah, it's really hard, the whole live tour thing. I did one last year, which was technically just me, just doing like a one man band electronic live thing.
Right.
but the amount of work that goes into it, and then the touring costs, it's just insane. You don't realize until you're in it, and you're like, okay, we got a tour with 7 people just to kind of get this thing off the bat, just to make
Yeah.
it work and sound good, and like everything that goes behind it, it just adds so much stress. You forget how easy it is to just rock up with your USBs and smash out a club show, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's like how much do you want to suffer for it? How much do you want to lose money and put on a show? Like it's an age old classic problem that we've always had in the music business, especially when there's bands involved and all obviously you've got sound engineers, tour managers, it's the list goes on, doesn't it?
Literally,
And
yeah.
and that's just the reality of it. And I think a lot of people don't see that almost.
Well, I think it's also is like, especially coming from the DJ, which I think you come from more of a live background than me. My influences are very much live, but when you kind of when I got used to DJing, and the concept of live, it's something that I'd always been excited to do, but just never had the opportunity to do it. And when the opportunity arrived with the album, it kind of had to take it, right? And you learn so much the first time you do it, of like how I do it differently. But there was something about performing live that just is so different to just playing some records on some decks.
Yeah, definitely. It's a deeper process, isn't it? I think you can get really used to how sort of easy it is to DJ, and that you can kind of, you're playing other people's music all the time,
Yeah.
a lot of the time. But I think if you're performing something, an album that you've written, and you can't, go, oh shit, this one's not working, mix something else in, because you can't. I
No.
mean,
Yeah.
so I think you're bearing your soul more, I guess, and that's probably why it's harder. It's you're making yourself more vulnerable, and I think I definitely noticed that when I stopped DJing so much, or stopped making the breach stuff, that when I came back to it, I was like, oh my God, I had it so easy.
Oh my god, so easy. Yeah, the whole DJ culture, especially nowadays, it's just so easy.
Yeah.
I know that we're coming from like almost like a privileged view because we've been doing it for years, right? And even when you start out as a DJ, you have, well, even as established DJs, you have really shit gigs. Like not every gig's the best gig of your life, and it can't be. But it's just so easy.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah, because I think, how people were putting themselves across now, you don't see those gigs when there's like two
No.
people there, someone throws a beer can at you. Do you know what I mean? There's, you don't see these ones where it's it's not it's not awful, because it's not an awful job to do, because it's pretty easy, really. Do you know what I mean? You're not a Cornish fisherman, or it's not
Yeah.
a difficult job. But yeah, you don't see the ones where it's just it's soul destroying. It can be soul destroying. Do you know what I mean? Especially if you love it so much, and you get hyped, I think, within yourself to go to gigs. But yeah, no one's posting those on Instagram, are they?
No. I wish it would.
Yeah, me too.
It'd be way more fun. Because we all have them, right? It's like everyone has a shit gig.
Yeah.
But it's weird because I remember actually Tiga posting about it once. I remember him. This was years ago, and he kind of like, it was really real, and he spoke about like how like sometimes as an artist you're just not on, and you don't perform as well as you should, and I think he kind of went really deep into how he played a show and he didn't perform as well as he could, and he didn't enjoy it, and there's some real talk that I'd love artists to really talk about, because I think it's just a fact that we're not always on, and every record we release isn't the best record we release, and every show that we play isn't the best show we play, and every time we get into a club is not we're not necessarily always feeling 100%, right? And sometimes we're not giving the people what they want. um but then that's also very different to when you're playing live, because you can't necessarily give them what you want. You got to give them what you have.
Yeah, that's the entire difference, obviously, between DJing and then doing performing, a piece of work. It's just a completely different ballgame. But
Yeah.
essentially, it's all entertainment, isn't it? So that's the business we're in.
Yeah, it's weird when entertainment becomes about your art. I guess that's just when you just hope that everyone likes every record of yours.
Yeah, or they're there to see, to hear
Oh,
the album, in its entirety, or some of, your older, bigger records, or like, stuff, maybe a tune from 20 years ago or something, if you've been making music that long. Or I think, it's, I mean, I guess that's the thing with packaging something right, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
people want to know what they're going to get.
Yeah.
Promoters want to know what they're going to get and how many numbers it's going to bring in. It's not
Yeah.
rocket science. That's just how it is.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's also a really hard thing to communicate that nowadays, though. Maybe not to promoters, but I think to fans, because I think they follow you for what they know you from. And then sometimes, a classic example, right? Like when we were younger, like even now, you find a new artist, you fall in love with their first album, they come out with album two, and then you have to like work out whether you like album two, right? And it takes years to get that point. But if there's an album two tour, you go to see them, but realistically, you want to see album one, and then you're like, oh, I'm not really that into it. It's like as human beings, it takes us time to enjoy new things. Like change is something that we don't like as human beings generally. So that's I think that's a hard thing to kind of timing is massive when it comes to touring and building fans. I believe. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I think so. I think the time's got to be right, and the youth's got to be feeling it. Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of how it works. And who goes to clubs? Do you know what I mean? It's unless you're just going to make music for one certain age group, I guess, which would be pretty weird, I guess. But I guess what happens a lot of the time. Like, so if it can go, is it going to go viral on TikTok? Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? That's your demographic there. And I guess like that's one way to look at it. And then the other is like, do I make art for myself and like passionately because that's what I want to do? I guess it's just a business decision, isn't it? You get
totally.
people that make, wicked clothes that are really underground, small shops that aren't making no money, but they're really amazing clothes. And then you have huge corporations making millions out of, dodgy
Shit
gear.
clothes. Yeah, yeah. Makes sense completely. Why Ibiza?
Because of the nature, to be honest, and the weather, and I'm just really into the sea. I've become like a sea man.
Are you doing free diving?
I'm into spearfishing.
Oh wow,
Went
cool.
to Esvedra 2 years ago, which is quite a big swim. And then I've just been to sort of long distance cold swimming,
That's cool, man.
front crawling about. I love it, absolutely love it. It's like changed my life almost really because I wasn't so into it before. I was a bit not scared of the sea because I'm into surfing and stuff like that, but I think when I was, when you're sort of out in the sea, quite far out on your own, it's sort of like it's like you against your own brain,
Yeah.
and whether you want to panic or not. And it taught me to sort of, yeah, just I guess adapt to stress easier maybe.
Okay.
And I've got a little boy now as well, Eden. He's nearly 4, so he's here, and yeah, just it's a wonderful place to live for the nature and the food and the produce and stuff like that.
Mm.
It's I'm well away from everything else that goes on here, really.
Yeah. Does it change in the summer for you of how you feel about the island, or...
Oh yeah, yeah. It's funny because it's just started getting busy here actually.
Yeah.
And you just notice it on the road straight away. You're just like, whoa, there's like, an influx of people. And where, as in the winter, you've kind of just been able to almost have it to yourself. That
Yeah.
it's quite a quiet place in winter, almost desolate in a lot of areas. I mean, I live in Santa Eulalia, and
It's beautiful there.
it's great. There's a winter community, and I've got my mates here who I can go and have a beer with at the end of the day and just have a
Yeah.
have a laugh and a crack. Which is I need that. I'm not someone who can hermit myself in the middle of nowhere. Although I did do that here for a few years, but it just
Yeah.
didn't. I kind of needed some people around. But yeah, I mean, so it's a funny island like that. You know, I think if you are when you've lived here for a few years, I think I'm coming up to my 7th year this year.
Oh
So
wow, I didn't know
it,
you were there for that long.
yeah, it's been quite a while. So it's it changes, and then you sort of view the island differently, and you have to kind of get off the island at points. It can become quite claustrophobic because it's a tiny
It's
little
an
island.
island, yeah, yeah.
Everyone knows each other, so it's funny, man. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to live. It's not an easy place to live sometimes, but
Mm.
it does come with its sort of ups and downs and ebbs and flows, and it is chaotic, and it seems to attract nutters like you've never seen before. So it's just like, it's a funny one.
Yeah, I've only ever lived there during the summer. I've never really done winters there. I've never really been there. I think that I think 2008 was my first time where I went there in the winter for like a period of time just to work out where I was going to live for 2000 for that summer.
Oh
And
well.
it was completely different. I'd like to do a bit more time out there during the winters and kind of see what it's like because I've got friends that live there and they absolutely love it as well.
Yeah, it changes, and the sea changes and the nature comes alive again. You know, when we look at what happens here in the summer, the sea is just full of crap for 6 months, and then
Yeah.
it takes, another 3, 4 months for that crap to disappear. And then the sea becomes so beautiful, so clear,
Mm.
and there's obviously really special places to go on this island if you're into that sort of thing, and just so much natural beauty. For me, anyway, that's kind of what I get off on is just being close to the sea these days.
I think you have to work out what you want in life, right? And how long. What was that like? The decision to go to Ibiza because I think it's quite a big thing. It's like living in Amsterdam is cool, right? Living in London, cool. Living in Bristol, cool. But like moving to a completely different, moving to an island is very different to living in like mainland Western world.
Yeah,
What was that thing that switched it over for you?
I think I'd been on a bit of a kind of journey with just, looking at myself, and I went on a big surf trip to Australia, and I spent time in India and
Mm,
a lot of time in Thailand and Bali, and just kind of got away from everything. It was like, just before COVID hit, it was like the year and a half, I think, before that. And I kind of just needed to. It's when I had, decided to, obviously go with, to stop making sort of such banging music, and was like,
yeah.
okay, let's work out where I want to go and where I want to be. The Dutch weather was just really doing my head in, because as much as Holland, a beautiful place, but it was, I was just indoors. I felt like I was indoors all the time, and
Yeah.
there's like a grey cloud that hangs over that area for months at a time. And I
Mm,
think I had like sort of seasonal depression or something. It just, I didn't feel right. I was like in the studio 14 hours a day, then in my flat. It just felt like I
it's
was
not
never,
healthy.
I almost couldn't breathe, and
Yeah.
my studio was underground in a basement. And I was just like, do you know what? I've kind of had enough of being in like base in studios like every day where I was
Yeah.
working, that, there's no windows, there's no, light. There was no, felt like I couldn't breathe almost a bit. And I think I just thought here, although it's not an easy move. Do you know what I mean? You are
No. Yeah.
in the middle of the sea. It's quite strange at times. You think it's like weird, but I just had to do it. I think for my health almost. I needed
Mm,
to change something and to go on another little journey myself and see who I was. Put myself in another hard situation, because it's not easy moving to different cities or
no.
countries. Or I mean, you've obviously done it moving to America, right?
Yeah.
So it's I mean, that's even further away almost, isn't it? It's more of a schlep on the flight and all that.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because I think it's so weird how like for me, America, it was a business decision,
Right.
right? It was like all of my work is in America. I pretty much only tour in America, so I might as well base myself there because financially it makes sense, right? Um, Now being back in the UK, it's like the goal was always to come back to the UK for me, but it's very different when you're moving countries, and I think it's interesting what you're saying about how kind of the work makes you slightly sick, and it's very interesting of how like we can do what we absolutely love, but it just not actually be that healthy for us,
Mm.
and working out how to make it healthier. Um, I'm still working that out. It's weird. It's a weird process because I think we can get caught up so much of like what we do and just keeping at it and keeping at it and keeping at it, and it can get really unhealthy at certain times.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I was, of an era of like, you sit in that studio until you've got a banger. Do you know what I mean?
Same.
If that's
Yeah.
nowadays for
Yeah.
2 weeks straight, and I was just incessant on it. I was obsessed and just couldn't let things go. I was like, I need to be in there all the time. And now I don't work as, I have periods where I work now. Like I'll say,
Mm,
I'll be in sessions with someone for, a 2 week period or a 3 week period, maybe tops, rather than, every, just smashing it out every day. I think even for my ears, because I was working
yeah.
loud as well. And after a while, it's just like, this is just, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere with this way of working anymore. And actually, if I take myself out and give myself time to breathe and, do my swimming, play my paddle, and like, have the things in my life which make me feel a bit more sane and, are sort of slightly a bit social. Because I
Yeah.
think sitting in a studio on your own is it's dangerous. It could be really dangerous
Yeah.
because if you think you're just on your own as a if you're sort of a producer that doesn't really work with many people and you're in a place where you can't collaborate with people at in a sort of human way. You can obviously do it on Zoom, but I think it's not really healthy for anyone unless you're a total hermit and that's what you're into. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would probably be healthy, but for me it started to get quite unhealthy, and I think it was just it didn't it was starting to make me a bit unhappy, and I thought
Mm.
this is something that is meant to give me loads of joy, but it's not anymore. But maybe it's the way I'm approaching it has to change.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think that is the thing, right? Is like we start out doing this because we absolutely fucking love it. There's like we do it because there's no option of doing anything else because we love it so much.
Mm.
And what you're saying is you do it so much because you love it that it actually destroys the original concept of why you do it.
Yeah, totally. If you look at, or if you think back to like when you were first starting to do it, every studio session was just like, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
amazing. Even for like, 15, 20 years, I felt like that. I think,
Yeah.
but then it got to a point where I was just like, this doesn't feel right to me anymore. But I think, if for some people that is great still. And, I kind of wish I was that age again that I could sit and do those sessions because like it was great. You know what I mean? I love 5 a.m. Changing a hi hat, and it's like the vision of your life. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, this
Yeah.
needs to happen, and then you work till like 9 a.m. and then you wake up at 1 p.m. next day. Right, let's go. Hi
Yeah.
hat doesn't sound right. Do you know what I mean? And you find yourself making really bad decisions. If you go on too long.
Yeah, I do kind of miss it though, right? But I guess life changes. You get older, right? I don't think that's something that can happen when you become slightly older and life changes, right?
Yeah, I think your perspective is going to change. Your emotions are going to change. How you hear things are going to change. Your tastes are going to change. Like
Mm,
all these things are changing because you're just like you're human, and these things are going to happen, and you're not like a dance floor robot. So I think unless you just want to do that and that really makes you happy, that'd be great. I almost wish that made me incredibly happy, and I could just do that every
mm,
day, formulaic, and I'd be like, oh, I'm really happy doing this. But there's something inside me which is just continuously unhappy about that stuff. I'm like, right, what can I do to push myself further as an artist or as a human, or just
yeah.
I like making my life quite difficult for myself like, sometimes.
Which I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Because with electronic music, with dance music specifically, or club music specifically, there's I don't know, maybe somebody's going to hate me for saying this, but there is a formulaicness to it, which it has to kind of fit within certain constraints. And I think sometimes when you're trying to be a songwriter, it doesn't actually necessarily fit in those constraints. I'm doing it at the moment where like I've got like full songs and trying to turn them into club records, and you're like, oh well, the verse, the pre, the middle eight can't fit in there. So you're literally just working with the hook, and then you're like, well, that doesn't also make sense in my mind because the chorus only works when the pre is before, and then before that is the verse.
Yeah.
And it's like a battle of like, well, I need this to work in a club, but realistically, this isn't a club record.
Then get a remix.
That's pretty much what you have to do, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much, but it's like treat it, where I'm at is I'm treating it as a remix now, of like I'm writing the songs, but then just going and remixing it, and the songs don't even get heard.
Right. But that's a shame, isn't it? Not if you
I
want
agree.
songs as they should be, or just release two albums, do a dancehall one, and then just do the songs or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a strange one. It is a strange one.
But do you feel like you're writing with constraints because it's got to be a dancehall record?
I'm not writing with constraints. I'm producing with constraints.
Producing with constraints, okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of what you were saying with the Breach stuff is like, we can all write club records, like you and I. Like we've done it for years, and we know what works in a club and we know what doesn't work in a club. But when you want to start writing actual songs and releasing them as actual songs, it changes how you write things and how people and what people want from you. Because I don't think necessarily people want that from you. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's really tough.
Yes, it's. I guess you just have to go with, you know, how do you want that song to be perceived? You know, is it right for it to be perceived in the original way that you've written it, or is it going to work for your business better if you change it, basically?
Business versus like, yeah, because I think that's also the thing, right? It's like sometimes you have to put the business first to a certain extent. And I think it's accepting that as an artist is like sometimes the business actually has to come first. Has there ever been a point for you where the business comes first?
No. I just can't do it. I wish I could. You know, I'd have a much easier life
Yeah.
if I could work like that. I think I'm now at a point where, you know, I just can't do it. I wish I could, man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wish I
Yeah.
could.
What is it that's stopping you? What is it that stops you though?
It's just something within me. Like I can't make music if I'm not really feeling it. And it's like with, you know, with if you're making music for business, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if what's going to come out of me is going to, if I'd be okay with it to come out even. Do you know what I mean? I think there'd be a point I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, this, let's do this for this money, and like, but I just, it's hard for me to do, really hard for me to do for some reason.
Yeah, I think it is. It's not something I've ever done. But I'm having more and more conversations now of like, of the process of where I'm at, and it's like, well, I want to put this record out, but it doesn't work in the format that I'm being presented to as my career. And if I was to just completely switch up my career, it's like, well, I also have bills to pay, right? I also have a life to kind of keep going. And don't get me wrong, I don't live an extravagant lifestyle, but it's almost like you're pretty much starting from square one again.
Yeah.
And rebuilding, and you've done that multiple times. And is it scary?
Yeah, it's really scary because you just don't know if it's going to work or not. It's like gambling, isn't it? It's like which money you going to put, what horse you're going to put your money on. You know, it's which is it the wild card that's going to, you know, win you loads of money, or is it the, you know, is it the safe bet?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because I've heard so many people, and even I say I've heard so many people kind of describe the music industry, of being in the music industry, especially in the roles that we sit in, as just a big gamble in. It's not business. It's a gamble. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. You can't really control the outcome of any of this stuff. So I always think like, what's the point? Because also, if you do come in from a business approach and you're like, this is going to work, and it doesn't work, then that's going to really fuck up your brain because you're going to be like, well, now I've fucked it because I've done something that I don't feel true about
Yeah.
for the money. And then that's going to make it even worse almost because then you're just chasing the money and then the money ain't even going to come,
Yeah.
it's not guaranteed, is it?
No, it's really not. And I think authenticity does shine through to a certain extent. Maybe not in the extreme commercial side of the industry, but I think when it comes to more of the underground, I think you can feel it.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to go back to the Breach stuff. Why did you start Breach?
I started Breach because I was kind of getting more into production, I think. And obviously, I produced, my records by myself and with Dye and Clips. And then my second album was with like Henrik Schwartz and Lovebirds and a bunch of other people. And it'd been quite collaborative.
Yeah.
And then with Breach, I was like, right, I love dance music, and I want to. I think at the time, like dubstep was pretty big, and I was going to Forward a lot at Plastic People, and like hanging out with like Ollie and Benga, and all that sort of crew. And I was like, there's a gap here at like 125 BPM that's more like, it was almost like a breach of styles. That's why I kind of called it Breach in the first place, because I felt like I was breaching through genres a little bit. So with Fatherless, which is the first tune I made, is
such
Breach.
a banger.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Such a banger, man.
That was the first Breach record I made. So I made that and then gave it to a few people like Joy Orbison and a couple of other DJs at the time. And then they just started caning it, and everyone was just going, like Loafer played it at Block, I think, and like SPMC was MCing over it. And it was just like, fucking hell, this one's going off. And, I even get goosebumps almost talking about those days because it's like it reignites that, like, childlike fucking hell. But, I was also just like a bit nuts back then. So, it's just, it was an amazing time. And I felt that there was almost a gap between that sort of bassier house almost, kind of how that sound started for me.
Which is interesting because Fatherless comes out 2010. 2011, you got the Breach remixes of Justy and I Need You.
Yeah.
And then 2012, You Won't Find Love Again, which honestly for me, like completely, like I've never told you this, but it completely changed my, like how I wrote music. Like generally that record like truly changed of like where I wanted to take music. And there was a level of that where I heard some Ben Westbeech in there and it was still Breach at the same time.
Oh, wow. Really beautiful, man. Thank you for saying that. It's really lovely.
No, dude, like it's. I still play that record today. I love that record so much. It's fucking amazing. Then you go on to like 101 with Midland.
Yeah.
And then Jack Happens.
Yeah.
It's actually really interesting. I'm looking at your like back catalog now, and it's so interesting how back then how little amount of music we used to release in comparison to what the electronic artists nowadays release, where you're releasing every 6 to 8 weeks. There you're releasing like 2-3 a year max. How do you feel about that nowadays?
I think it was different back then because tunes had time to breathe, and to get big, a lot of people would have to be playing your tune, and and there was also, I guess, like maybe a tighter circuit of sounds and scenes that were happening. So, I mean, nowadays it's so broad what DJs are playing, and it felt like there was a crew of us, and you could give your tune to like maybe 5 or 6 people, and then it would be being heard out by people. You had radio, you had like Rinse, you had your Pirates and all that going on. So it's like, it just works a lot more like through like a smaller channel,
Yeah.
I guess, and then it would be like those are the records that have time to get momentum and for people to get into them. I think now it's just like a blanket sort of splurge of like, is this one going to hit? Is this one going to hit? And there's less like building of the records.
Yeah.
So I think it was just a very different time, I think.
Yeah. Would you, if you were to go back on the breach side of things, would you be looking at it as like a releasing more regularly, or is it something that you just still stick to what you do as like just release as and when?
I think I'm just writing. Well, I'm just starting to write some breach records now. So
Yeah.
I think I needed some time off from it, and then
Mm.
I think I've just been getting a bit more back into the idea of like, you know, I love that sort of music still, but I just
Yeah.
needed to come at it from a different angle. So I don't know. It's been an interesting few months for me because I'm kind of going into it with quite an open mind, but also wanting to make a few destroyers. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. We all want one now and again, don't we?
Yeah, no, it feels good. Do you know what I mean? If you got a big one, and that's the culture I come from. Do you know what I mean? It was like I grew up, sitting in the car, in service stations with clips and dye on the way to gigs, and seeing just people just slay down raves, and it was like that's what I came from. That's why I got into it. That's the energy level. So
Yeah.
when you have made a record like that and you do see it go off, yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's a wonderful feeling. But then to continue that on continuously, I guess, is a bit tougher, to
I think
carry
it's
it
also,
on.
yeah, totally. Like, I think it's also the pressure of like once a record's done the business of like, oh fuck, I have to recreate that again. When realistically, the record was probably written with zero pressure, right?
Yeah.
How was that with Jack?
Um, Again, a really funny one because there was no pressure at that
Exactly.
point.
Yeah.
It was. I think the pressure came after that went really big because, if we look at that, that started out as a B side for a Dirty Bird record. It was a tune called "Let's Get Hot," which
Still a banger.
which I had written. "Let's Get Hot." That actually started out as a remix for Damien Lazarus's label of the Infinity Inc. Don't know where it started and I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know where it ends, which has actually just been remixed again, right, by Alan Dixon.
Oh, has it really?
But that's how that tune started. So they didn't want it, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll put my own vocal on it. And then I think I was having some Vietnamese food with Bartley, Claude Fonzo's Stroke, and with this girl Jane who used to own T Bar. Do you remember T Bar in
Yeah.
London? It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
so I was playing there a lot and was really friendly with her, and she was bringing over people like Soul Clap and Wolf and Lamb and Barclay.
Mm.
And Barclay at the table was like, dude, this fatherless tune, like, it's the bollocks. Well,
Yeah.
he didn't say it's bollocks because he's American. But he's like, look, listen, this is the sound that it sounds to me like if Dirty Bird was a UK thing, this would be it. And I was like, wow, because obviously we all wanted to be on Dirty Bird at
Of
that time.
course. Yeah.
It's so cool. And he said to me, I love this Let's Get Hot record, but can you make, have you got anything like a bit sleazier? And so I think that night I went to bed and then I had this dream in the night and woke up with the lyrics in my head and then put it on my phone. And then that's how Jack was made, basically. I
Wow.
made it in like 2 days. It took about a month to mix down, but other than that, it was a pretty quick process, but one that I think was sparked by him saying that stuff to me, and you obviously heard it and was just like, okay, add a snare roll and it's done. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, wow, this is so exciting.
He was always great at A&R in records back then. He was always like, it always came from like a really authentic place of what's going to work on the club, and how is this going to kind of, yeah, it was just a different time. What's those pressures after something like that happens?
Well, it's a pressure to sell records, then, isn't it?
Mm.
Luckily I'd made everything that you never had before I'd made
Oh,
Jack.
really? Wow.
That was sitting there. That actually started as a remix for Andrea Triana. So it's it's strange how things come about. And then obviously Atlantic bought or licensed Jack off Dirty Bird, and that's what then propelled it into the top 10, because they obviously did that video and put a bunch more money behind it. So that had been out for 6 months, which was, at the time, that was quite weird. I mean, nowadays you'd look at a relicensing agreement and go, of course that makes sense, but at that time there wasn't a huge amount of it happening, so it was quite a strange thing to happen. I think at the end there was, loads of the majors were going for it, and I think then somehow Atlantic UK and Atlantic America, I think, were then outbidding each other to get it. It's just a really weird story, and then obviously when that happened, the pressure was on. But then I had that second record there, so and then the third one happened and was with Khalees. So I think at that point then it was like, there was talking about the Christmas number ones, and you think, now this is like moving way too quickly from something that I just started as an underground club thing. So I think it changed it all for me. And then I was obviously, on huge lineups and having to play Jack. You just feel like, you're like a sort of, I guess, like a hit monkey or something. You just have to, like, all they're there to see is you play that one tune, and that's it. They couldn't, care less if you're a DJ, or they just want to see that one tune. And then that's how it kind of felt for years. I mean, if it happens, to anyone with a big record as a DJ, you finally get a bit sick of playing it almost. Then you think, well, hang on, that's why you're getting this money to be playing here, because you're going to play this record. That's how the business works.
It's the chicken and egg situation, right? It's like, you'll dream of having a hit record to a certain extent, and then when that hit record happens, is it actually what you want? It's interesting. Have you seen the new Bob Dylan film?
I have, yeah.
Similar situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, any true artist is going to go against the grain. Do you know what I mean? Look at Sinead O'Connor's another great one. Like, had it all, and then just was like, I mean, and a lot of artists, and I'm guilty of this myself, are self-sabotagers. I mean, I am textbook self-sabotage. I will, I'll do it all day. You know what I mean? So I think it's also down to that, and wanting to move forward with art, and not just being known for one thing and then having to just play that for the rest of your life. It's like, it's almost a bit unfair almost. You know what I mean? If you think how we're meant to evolve as humans.
Do you ever wish you weren't a self-sabotager?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I think we all, not all of us do it, but I think a lot of us want to keep pushing.
Yeah.
But I think also not everyone has had massive hits that it actually matters about it, right? Where, like, I've never had an experience where I've had a record that's gone that big where everyone just expects that. I've had bigger records where you kind of have to play those for a certain period of time, but then there comes a point when people are actually fine with the new records that you put out. But I've never had that hit record that, like, they just want to hear that. Strange.
Yeah, you've never had, like, people shouting at you from the crowd, play that tune, come on.
Yeah, like, occasionally, but it's, again, like, I haven't had a hit record like that. Like, that was, like, Jack was massive, still is, right? Like, just that vocal is still, like, huge, and I'm sure people make edits of it left, right, and center.
Yeah, I get sent, like, probably about 10 a day. not joking.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I love it, man.
But that's also it's a compliment, and I'm grateful.
Of course, man.
And I think you can just be like, but it happens to every one person I've seen it happen to. It's it's a similar story. It's like, I think, but I have it from a sort of a party goer's perspective. Like, I went to see Little Louis play, and he didn't play French Kiss, and I was just like,
what a wanker.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's why I've come, So I get it, I totally get it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, isn't it, when we're the consumer of, like, what we expect, and then it's like going to a Rolling Stones concert and he just plays Bob Marley all night. They just play Bob Marley. It would be sick, realistically, but you want to hear them play the big ones.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what it's about. It's the entertainment business.
Fuck, we're game over, mate. New album, Everything Is Within You, out now. It's fucking amazing, man. Congrats on all your work that you put into this. Thanks for all the music you've made over the years as well, dude. Keep doing your thing, and can't wait to catch up in person at some point.
Thanks so much, Will.
Big
Wicked
love, man.
interview, man. Thank you.
Big love. And that's a wrap. Thanks to Ben for coming on. Love you all. Keep safe. Till next time.